There's a lot of talk these days about President Donald Trump cracking down on illegal immigration. But here's the one thing you need to know about what exactly illegal means in this context. Under federal law, it is a crime for someone to sneak into the U.S. without the approval of an immigration officer. That's a misdemeanor offense. Many foreign nationals legally enter the country every day on valid visas, but end up overstaying for a variety of reasons. But that's not a crime. It's a civil violation that gets handled in immigration court. In fact, current estimates show that roughly 45% of undocumented immigrants originally entered the U.S. legally. Undocumented presence alone is only a crime if someone is deported and then returns without permission. Now, President Trump has often focused on immigrants who commit other felonies while being in the U.S., but studies show those are actually the exceptions. So when you hear people say over 11 million unauthorized immigrants are living here in the U.S., remember, they haven't all committed a crime just by being here.
Mexico is the hardest country in the world just about to become a citizen of, but they send people over here. And I'm not just talking Mexico. They're coming in from Asia. They're coming in from all over the world.
Okay, conceptually, I understand what you're saying and what you're describing, but still, tell me the how. Are you going to have a massive deportation force?
You're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely.
So far, we saw the crackdown by ICE last week or two. And it was on every news program, local programs, national programs. There you saw the ICE agents, heavily armored, escorting the undocumented immigrants from their community, 684 of them. We saw it every night on the news. Imagine that we have 10,990,000, whatever the math is, to go. So if we have been seeing this human trauma of 684 immigrants being rounded up and deported, imagine what it's going to be like when it's 10 million. It's going to convulse this country. It is really going to tear neighborhoods apart. And I think that in following through on the president's, I get it, it's his campaign promise, and I do not believe he would have been elected but for the immigration issue. I think that the country is in for a very rocky road. The situation, to argue objectively and coolly, is very difficult. Now, I've seen your statistics, your powerful statistics from your meeting. Incidentally, you looked a little younger, a little less gray. 2014.
I love you too, Geraldo. Thanks a whole lot.
But I just saw the Cato Institute study in preparation for this appearance. These undocumented immigrants commit fewer crimes per capita than citizens do. You could argue that undocumented immigrants moving into a community makes it safer per capita than it was before they moved in. I know that those arguments fall on deaf ears. I know that there is an instinctive revulsion about people who are here without permission.
But for example, in fiscal year 2015, 36.6% of the over 70,000 federal sentences for crimes committed by illegals. Wait a minute, that does not jive with your statistics you just gave.
But you know what these crimes are, by and large? These aren't violent crimes like Katie Steinle. These are crimes where I want to work. I'm here without documentation. I get a fake Social Security card, a federal felony. I pay Social Security tax to this fake Social Security account. This is money I'm paying in that I have no chance of ever redeeming.
That does happen. I'm not going to dispute it.
This is my point. My point is that sanctuary cities and the litigation that will flow from sanctuary cities will be where the rubber meets the road, where the right and the left fight it out, where the red and the blue have this war. This will be the battleground.
I think you're right, but I think they're going to lose money. I think Donald Trump will cut off federal funds to those cities if they refuse to enforce federal law. And I think he has every right legally to do so.
I think that what should happen, I am delighted that he now has a Hispanic in his cabinet.
In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, during his CPAC speech today, the president once again promised to put up a wall between the U.S. and Mexican border and crack down on illegal immigrants who commit crimes in this country.
We're building the wall. We're building the wall. In fact, it's going to start soon. Way ahead of schedule. Way ahead of schedule. And remember, we are getting the bad ones out. These are bad dudes. We're getting the bad ones out. Okay? As we speak today, immigration officers are finding the gang members, the drug dealers, and the criminal aliens and throwing them the hell out of our country.
Yesterday, Mr. Trump described the effort as, quote, a military operation, which Press Secretary Sean Spicer later clarified was not meant to be taken literally. And Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly also tried to calm fears during a meeting yesterday with Mexican officials.
There will be no, repeat, no mass deportations. Everything we do in DHS will be done legally and according to human rights in the legal justice system of the United States.
Joining us now from Miami, Univision anchor Jorge Ramos. Jorge, first of all, thanks for talking to us. The best crime figures that we could come up with were that roughly 820,000 of the people in this country illegally are convicted criminals. Do you have any problem with finding them and kicking them out of the country?
I have absolutely no problem with criminals. I have no problem with terrorists, with drug traffickers. But the problem, Chris, is that President Trump is criminalizing the immigrants in this country. The vast majority of immigrants, the vast majority of undocumented immigrants in this country are not criminals, are not terrorists. And that's precisely the problem. You know, they come here because they want to work. They harvest the food that we eat. They build our homes, and they don't want to get in trouble with the police. I was reading, before doing the interview, a report by the American Immigration Council. Immigrants are less likely to be criminals or be behind bars than U.S. citizens.
Jorge, so I understand that. I understand that. But I mean, here you have John Kelly, the Secretary of Homeland Security, saying there are not going to be mass deportations. You've got President Trump in his speech talking about rapists and gang members and drug dealers. Why not take yes for an answer that those are the folks he wants to deport?
That's fine, but the problem is that how you define criminal now. During the Obama administration, and we have to say it, President Barack Obama deported more immigrants than any other president in the history of the United States, 2.5 million. But now, at least they intended to deport only violent criminals. That's not the case right now. General Kelly, I heard exactly the same thing that you did. He's saying that there will be no mass deportations. Well, then what happened a week ago? They deported more than 680 immigrants. How do you define, is that a mass deportation? I think it is, and the problem is that they were deporting not only the criminals, or what they consider criminals, but also people that had really absolutely no problem with the law. A woman called Guadalupe Garcia, 22 years in this country, 2 kids, 2 American kids. She was deported. She was just a mom.
Well, first of all, are you saying that when General Kelly says no mass deportations, he's misleading, he's lying?
No, what I'm saying, I don't know exactly how he defines mass deportation, but the fact is that he ordered the deportation of 680 immigrants last week. How do you consider that? How do you define that?
Well, I assume some of them are criminals, or most of them were criminals. Do you have any reason to believe that?
Some of them, exactly, some of them, but many of them are not.
Well, let me ask you about a different kind of quote, criminal, and that is somebody who comes into this country. We're not talking about just crossing the border, but somebody who then gets a false Social Security card or gets false papers, gets a driver's license illegally that allows them to get government benefits. Do you consider that a crime?
Ari, you've been taking a look at the new DHS guidance on strengthening immigration and border enforcement. And what are you seeing in your reporting?
Well, there's 2 memos.
What's drastically different?
Well, that's a great question. Look, there's 2 memos here. It's on border enforcement and on the immigration actions that go on inside the U.S. And I would say a bunch of this is what I would call real stuff, like hiring border agents, making it basically faster and easier to deport people depending on where they're located, 10,000 more ICE agents, and basically ramping up what you see on the screen there, that 287G. That's jargon to refer to the fact that you have local cops who can be on the beat and be more involved in immigration. That's the real stuff. Then there's some stuff that we just don't know whether it's real or not. For example, there's a section really interesting that hasn't gotten much attention yet in the memo that says, let's count up all the U.S. aid to Mexico that's of a non-intelligence variety. Let's quantify it. Why? Who knows? Probably as a leverage point on paying for the wall. There's another part of the memo that says, let's immediately start planning, designing, and building the wall. Those are words on a piece of paper. Will it happen?
I know where
the
you're
president is given so much authority.
Absolutely.
In this area especially, that the Supreme Court, even the Ninth Circuit would be hard-pressed to stop this, right?
The new immigration stuff we're talking about
Yes.
today? Yes, absolutely. Look, the two greatest powers the President of the United States have is the war-making power and the immigration power. And especially with regard to the borders and the contiguous enforcement for the United States, it is a very strong power. So when you talk about these kind of things, this is farther than the Obama administration went, but whether people want to hear this or not, it is in its thrust similar to a lot of what the Obama administration did, because there was a heavy emphasis on deportations. The other interesting part is, for now, as you know, they're maintaining the programs that protect child arrivals here. That was something that the previous president was very proud of, and they're not changing that yet. And that's the question.
So let me ask you legally. Obviously, they've gone, this wasn't like Stephen Miller deciding I'm going to play president or dictator. They actually did an interagency review of this. So does it look like it's more likely to pass the sniff test in the courts?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there have been aspects of both immigration and other policies here that have been rolled out chaotically or even completely illogically. You mentioned Mr. Miller. He has said a range of things about the way they've rolled out policy and a total lack of regard for the judicial system. He even said, with regard to the travel ban at one point, our power will not be questioned. Mr. Miller, you can quote Star Wars or the Emperor if you want, but welcome to the United States. This is not the way we do things under the rule of law. And there are parts that are better. I will say this, that whether you agree or disagree with what's in here, this is a better process.
It is a better process, and also, explain to viewers, if you will, who may not like Donald Trump's immigration policy.
Also, don't lose sight of the jobs angle. That's why I'm here, I presume, talk about the economy, which is 60% of undocumented workers live in just 6 states. California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Texas, and Florida. How many of those went for Mr. Trump? Right, Florida and Texas. So the majority, 4 of them, did not. So I'm not sure Mr. Trump or his team is that concerned about the impact. 60% of all undocumented workers are in those 6 states. There's about 8 to 9 million, the estimates are sketchy, undocumented workers. They contribute a couple percent to GDP overall. So how many people we're talking about ultimately could have an impact on the economy. Here's the problem, Joe and Mika. You guys know this very well. You are not going to get any business owner who's going to sit up here on national TV and look in the camera and say, yes, my business relies on undocumented workers. Right. So they're not going to have those protections because nobody is going to say it. But everybody whispers it in the corners. You know.
There's a lot of talk these days about President Donald Trump cracking down on illegal immigration. But here's the one thing you need to know about what exactly illegal means in this context. Under federal law, it is a crime for someone to sneak into the U.S. without the approval of an immigration officer. That's a misdemeanor offense. Many foreign nationals legally enter the country every day on valid visas, but end up overstaying for a variety of reasons. But that's not a crime. It's a civil violation that gets handled in immigration court. In fact, current estimates show that roughly 45% of undocumented immigrants originally entered the U.S. legally. Undocumented presence alone is only a crime if someone is deported and then returns without permission. Now, President Trump has often focused on immigrants who commit other felonies while being in the U.S., but studies show those are actually the exceptions. So when you hear people say over 11 million unauthorized immigrants are living here in the U.S., remember, they haven't all committed a crime just by being here.